Hello, everybody. I just want to introduce Ms. Alicia Santiago. She is a liaison engineer for Boeing, and she'll be answering some questions on communication. Thank you.
Hi, guys. Nice to meet you.
I'd like to start by saying thank you.
Whoa.
I'd like to start by saying thank you for agreeing to be part of this interview. We understand your time is very important, and I would like to start the interview by asking a few questions regarding communication within your profession. So, why is technical communication important as a liaison engineer?
Okay, so most everybody in this room probably doesn't know what a liaison engineer is, and that's kind of our internal name for what I do. I'm actually an MRB engineer. So what that means is for Boeing to make an airplane, we hold certain certifications, and these are mandated by the Code of Federal Regulations, and they're fed through our regulatory office, which is the FAA, right? So in order for us to meet what is safe to fly, we have to follow all these rules, and part of that is quality. And an aspect of quality is when things don't really meet the design requirements. So when things don't go together as they should, then there's a board that is convened, and they're supposed to go decide what to do with that product. So I'm part of that board. Our formal title is Material Review Board, and our authority is delegated from the FAA, which goes up to the 14 CFR chapters 21 through such and such to meet the Code of Federal Regulations. So my work statement gets these, we call them non-conforming products, or things that are not the way they should, and I design the repairs, or I instruct on what to do with them, whether they're good for use for the production life or special things to do with them. And everything that I do is basically written. And we not only do we type or provide instructions to the people within our shop, we're also highly audited because we are operating under the FAA. So my instructions have to be worded clearly and concisely enough to last for the entire lifetime of the airplane, and for us to meet what we call information retention requirements. So in other words, you can't just feed your instructions through a shredder and call it good the month after you put it out. It has to last for a certain regulated amount of time. So because of that, we operate under this mentality of, if I were to read my instructions 10 years from now, would I be able to arrive at the same conclusion that I did that day that I wrote them? So it is extremely important for us as MRB engineers to not only assess the situation, but to document our processes and our instructions in a way that people 10 years from now, or in other countries, or as an auditor from the FAA, to read those instructions and say my technical writing is clear enough to understand what I arrived at, and that it's auditable. So it would also be able to be audited by an FAA person.
Okay. So are the documents you create meant for international use as well, or is it just local, like just the area?
So it's internal, but also because we have source delegation from the FAA, they can and they will pull our records, and they'll say, all right, this thing happened over here, and this MRB engineer said to do these things, and they can print it out and say, all right, here's your instructions. There's maybe a typo here, or misclarity here, or your attachment didn't match this. All of those things have to be dealt with beforehand. So all of our processes are both internally audited and also externally, because the FAA can pull our records at any given moment and make sure that they comply with the CFRs, which are the Code of Federal Regulations. So it's not like anybody can go from an external company and pull our records, because then they would have access to Boeing's information, and that's not allowed. That's how we maintain competitive edge, is by keeping all of our processes typed.
Okay. So in the sense of technical communication, is there any training involved, like during the hiring process at Boeing? So like, is there any training that you need to go through in technical communication?
So there isn't so much a requirement about how to write your instructions, but my particular training is a mandatory 1-year training plan. So you hire in fresh from college and you go on a training program for at least 1 year. And part of that is learning what type of material should be in your written instructions. And it's not just clarity, it's your audience. So you can't write things at such a high scientific level that your instructions getting fed to a mechanic who's meant to turn your lengthy instructions into actual work guesses and fails at that, and then that can end up as an audit finding in itself. So you have to, number one, understand your responsibilities, understand the implications to the aircraft for its lifetime guarantee of 30 plus years. You also have to understand your audience of both the scientific realm. So if you were a auditor, or maybe from somebody in the sciences, and you're trying to go over the math I did, and you don't understand it or you don't agree with it, I have to be able to break that down at a level that somebody can go in and review my work from both an engineering side or a scientific side, and also the mechanic doing the work can read my work and implement my instructions on the aircraft or the aircraft parts.
Okay.
So I have to wear, when I do my instructions, I have to wear many hats. I have to wear the engineer hat, I have to wear the shop floor hat, I have to wear the company hat, what's good for the company. So there's lots of different audiences that I have to consider when I write my instructions.
Okay. So is there a strict guideline you have to follow, like there is a blueprint for the document, like this is exactly how it's to be, or are you allowed to use your own discretion on the documents?
There's more, it's more about completion, and because each situation is entirely different, it's almost never the same thing or the same location. So each set of instructions is unique. Everything that I do is unique for every set of events that it occurs on. It's a unique situation. So there's not really a copy-paste type of thing. We're supposed to be scientists and engineers, and so we can't just treat this as a redundant issue unless it is, and then we have another process for that. But we should be implementing at least some type of standardization so that when that same thing happens to the next shift or whatever, and they provide their sets of instructions, it's not so wildly different that the mechanics or the auditor, whoever's looking at our work, goes, wow, you guys really have wild approaches. Is there something up that we need to know about? Is there a reason? And mind you, we're, as a board, we have our own delegated authority, so we can make different decisions, and it's a different set of circumstances each and every time. But we have to remember who our audience is, and so because of that, we try within a group to standardize as much as we can our processes.
Okay. How is communicating with your supervisors and your coworkers through email or proposals different in terms of format and tone? So when you're talking about, if you're emailing like a supervisor of yours or someone higher in upper management, is it different than if you're talking with your coworkers or?
Oh yes.
Is it
Yes. I have 2 signatures on my email. One is my everyday, it's got some little witty sarcasm at the bottom, and Confucius say or whatever, and, just some little witty thing. Then I have my serious engineer signature, and it's stripped of all things. It's just my name and my role and my organization, phone number, things like that. So when you communicate through email, it's a document, and it's an auditable document. It's something that can be pulled by IT. It could be pulled by the government. It's self-disclosing. So you should highly respect the power of somebody taking your private email and forwarding it to whoever they want. And it's happened. It's happened accidentally. It's happened purposefully. So because of that, when obviously when you talk supervisor, you put on your serious text and try to make things polite and concise and bullets instead of lengthy verbiage, things like that. So there's obvious differences for when somebody's responding to an executive or somebody really high up versus their buddy who has a really quick request for information and you're just shooting emails back and forth. Some people treat emails like conversations, like instant messages, and that's fine too as long as it's, respectful and meets the standards that we have for the company. I tend to treat all emails like documents, because they are.
Right.
So definitely different hats that I wear when I respond to people. when I'm talking to my internal scientists, I tend to put all the technicality in it. I'm explaining in depth what I'm doing or asking for help and asking for specific things. If I'm talking to somebody else who doesn't understand those things, I'm going to strip it of all that and get down to the nitty-gritty, because some people can interpret that as condescending. So always considering the audience and being really, really conscientious and making sure you're not talking above people, because you're going to work against the whole process if you do that. And a lot of people will start skimming through. I mean, a lot of people don't even read the whole thing. They're going to start skimming through, and if it's lengthy, you're going to lose your audience real quick, and maybe you needed that guy to review your process or to answer your questions. So the format, the length, and the complexity of what you're saying is definitely tailored to each person.
Okay. So, in your personal opinion, how do you think technical writing at Boeing is going to change within the next few years, 5 years or so?
If anything, I would think we would need to simplify it, because we do operate under a source delegation from the FAA. All of our work has to be fed up to them and to meet the CFRs. So because of that, if you have a set of instructions that are too complex, that invites variables. Complexity invites interpretation. Interpretation invites errors. So in order to remove yourself from that, I would think we would need to move towards more simplified, or, and we're pretty good at it, you know, defining things or examples, making it at a 6th grade reading level, basically, because when you're auditing, you don't want to have to go down and over-explain yourself. You need everything to be there. It's a document. Everything you do is a document, basically.
Okay. Yeah, we were just discussing that in class, how your documents, whenever someone's reading, it should be at least like 7th grade level, like person in 7th grade can easily understand it.
Yeah.
Even if you're talking about like very intricate stuff about engineering and stuff.
Yeah.
If it's at 7th grade reading level, that should be your target.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And unless you're talking to a specific expert who understands that language, and you're really trying to match them with the level of understanding so that you don't make an error, so that you're driving with whatever you're trying to figure out, that's when to do it. Anything else, I think, should be concise, bulleted, straight to the point. You don't want to talk over people's heads. It's always a bad idea.
Okay, I agree. Thank you. When conducting research for your company, is it more beneficial to acquire information from your colleagues or outside sources?
So I can't talk too much about how the Boeing research goes, but all of our information is vetted, and so we have to go internal.
Okay.
And that's what I'll say for that one. We don't go and Google, how should I handle this?
Right.
And then go implement that on a live aircraft, and when it fails, we're like, geez, I really should have vetted my information. So that's, you know, obviously our processes are highly regulated, and we have to vet everything that we do with a substantial amount of testing.
Okay. For my final question would be, what other information would be helpful for me to know about your field or your company in terms of technical communication?
So if I were to say anything about that is, and I keep going back to the whole, you're working to prove compliance to federal regulations. Because of that, simplicity and clarity is highly valued over throwing words that you may not know how to use yet, or attachments that are just nonsense. So considering the audience, and also thinking about if what you're saying or what you're typing, any type of instructions, is going to invite interpretation, that's when you should pause and just make it clear. If that means adding one more dimension or a different attachment showing a twisted view of your whatever part, or, you know, a flat view versus a plan view. So you should always clarify. If that means one more piece of paper, that's better than doing it in words and tripping over yourself, because interpretation is just terrible. It just invites errors. So.
Does that happen often in your experience, like how there might be some interpretation issues, like how someone interpreted it wrong? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, I mean, we have a rigorous process, but I have seen some things, and that's part of the training, actually. So that's part of when you're training, is that you get a shot at, hey Lisa, what would you do in this situation? And I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And then I hand it in and my lead says, no, you're not. You want to know why? Because it's nonsense. Because they could interpret that as this, or what's your tolerance for that, or they could totally take that word and you didn't put a top tolerance on it. They could just, so we have processes for training that out of people. Huh?
Out of them, yeah.
Yeah, because it's definitely, when you first hire in, you want to kind of show just how good you are at this whole engineering thing and show off a little, and it really comes down to your audience as mechanics. They are not going to buy into it.
Yeah.
And you're just inviting trouble. So make things clear, make things, no questions asked type of thing.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Actually, I had a two-part question. You mentioned auditing a lot in your speech. And so the first part is the auditor or the audit system, is it internal or is it external from
It's
Boeing?
both.
It's both.
It's
Okay.
both. Yeah.
And then do you find that process collaborative or is it punitive? Like, are they out to punish you or are they out to make the system better?
So the processes get audited because it should never come down to that guy did something wrong. It should never come down to that. There's always, everything that we do is a whole system of checks and balances. If something fell through the system, it's because the system failed. So it's never like, hey Bob, your instructions are terrible and I want you to explain this. No, it's not just Bob. It's Bob and the person who checked his work and the person who performed the work and the person who stamped off the work and the person who stamped off the stamp off. So there's a whole layering of way that we show compliance with the FAA, and it's not punitive. So if there's something that we need to work on, it's addressed systematically, not individual. Let's get a spray bottle and then whack them on the head with it. It's definitely, hey, we got to word our processes better. We got to sometimes you'll see pushed training or a tech talk or something like that. So we address things systematically.
I wanted to thank you once again for coming. And does anybody else in the class have questions about Alicia, what she does?
So I used to work at Boeing, QA, over at Wings 37. Before I left, they were talking about building a plant, plant over in China. Have you had any experience with having to translate our documents to help the Chinese understand? Or have you had any experience with that whole process of building something over in China for an American product?
So I do coordinate some things, and I won't say which countries, but overseas. My work will get translated, and what I do to help that is make pictures. So everything goes down to a shared language. It's math and it's dimensions and it's agreed upon. ASME or ASTME, so they're agreed upon tolerancing languages. So 2 inches and with this different type of GD&T frame is going to mean the same to them as it does to us. So as long as our document has a very translatable description of what we're providing to them, it should and does work. So I've definitely done a lot of coordinations with different companies overseas, or different entities, we'll say, overseas, and I have to do my absolute best job at making sure the documentation of whatever I'm trying to give them is there. And if that means more pictures or more views of whatever it is, then by all means I'll do that for them, because there is going to be some English translation errors, but we do share the same language as far as engineering tolerances and drawings. I think that's all handled there.
Yeah, our text, every chapter has something about culture and the effect of our documents and how that will be affected by it. Another topic just similar to that is you have an ADS document that narrows words down that you can use and you can't, like instead of saying the right way to do something, the correct way to do something. In our text it talked about the aerospace industry or the aviation industry having a document that's 1,000 words that you can use and nothing more, or something like that. Have you heard of that document?
I have not, no.
Okay.
I've definitely used, on some of my more complex repairs, many words.
Right.
I don't know how many, but it just depends on the scope of your work. I wouldn't say there's a limitation to the amount, as long as the clarity and the technical soundness of it is there and the supporting documentation is there. That's really what we're driving for, not follow these rules for how it outputs. It's follow these rules to meet the regulations. That is our underlying thing, is we have to meet the regulations.
So as long as it's clear and concise, meeting regulations, you're okay.
And other things,
Right.
but yes,
But
yes.
the main.
Clarity is key.
Once again, this is Lisa Santiago. She's liaison engineer at Boeing, and thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome.